Somewhere there is a photograph of you as a baby. Someone is holding you. Their face is turned toward the camera, and yours is turned toward theirs. You have seen this picture before. You know the room. You know the people in it. And you remember none of it, not the room, not the arms, not 1 second of it. Most people assume those memories were never made in the first place, that a baby's brain is simply too unfinished to record anything, and that the first years of a human life come back blank because nothing was ever written down. For more than a century, that is what science said too. In 2025, that answer fell apart. The blank is bigger than most people realize. It covers roughly your first 3 years, and for many people it stretches to 4 or 5. Think about what fits inside that window. You learned to walk. You learned an entire language from nothing, without anyone explaining a single rule of it. You learned which face meant safety and which sound meant danger. You formed the first attachments of your life, the ones that would quietly shape how much you trust other people for the next 80 years. That is the most concentrated period of learning you will ever experience. And you cannot access one moment of it. Most people push back on this. They will tell you they have a memory from that age, a birthday, a hospital corridor, a dog. But when researchers look closely at those earliest memories, a pattern turns up that most people find uncomfortable. A great many of them are reconstructions, built later out of a photograph someone showed you, or a story your family told at dinner so many times that your brain eventually filed the retelling as an experience of your own. The scene feels firsthand, the details are borrowed, which means that for a lot of people, the earliest thing they remember is not a memory at all. It is a summary somebody else wrote. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it infantile amnesia, which simply means the loss of memory from earliest childhood. Sigmund Freud described the phenomenon in 1899, and for the next 120 years the explanation stayed remarkably stable. The blame fell on a single structure buried in your brain. It sits deep in the temporal lobe, curled and small, named after the sea creature it resembles, the hippocampus. In plain terms, the hippocampus is the part of your brain that takes a moment you are living through and stamps it into an event you can later pull back up. Without it, experience passes through you and leaves nothing you can retrieve on purpose. The standard explanation was that in infancy, this structure simply is not finished, still under construction, still wiring itself together, a recording device that had not yet been plugged in. It was a clean answer. It fit everything anyone could observe. And it had one problem that took decades to expose. The problem was never really the theory. The problem was that nobody could test it. Think about what a memory of an event actually is. Its defining feature is that you can describe it. You can say what happened, where you were, who else was in the room. That description is the thing that separates remembering a moment from simply knowing a fact. Now try that with someone who cannot speak. This is the wall that infant memory research kept hitting. The one tool that proves an episodic memory exists is language, and the people you most need to study do not have it yet. So for decades, researchers worked around it using behavior. Tie a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging over the crib. The baby kicks, the mobile spins, the baby learns the connection. Come back days later, show the same mobile, and watch whether the kicking starts again. If it does, something survived. It was clever work, but it was indirect. It told you that a learned behavior had persisted. It could not tell you whether the brain had filed away a specific moment in a specific place, the way your memory of last Tuesday is filed. To answer that, someone would have to watch the brain do it, live, while the baby was awake. In 2025, a team at Yale University did exactly that. The study was led by Tristan Yates with Nicholas Turk Brown, a professor of psychology at Yale and director of the university's Wu Tsai Institute, as senior author. Their instrument was functional magnetic resonance imaging, a scanner that tracks blood flow through the brain and shows you which regions are working moment to moment. There is a reason nobody had done this properly before. That scanner demands stillness. Almost all previous infant brain imaging had been done while the babies were asleep for obvious reasons. This team needed them awake, alert, calm, and paying attention. Inside a loud machine, for long enough to run an experiment. Everything about that is hard. Babies squirm, babies get bored, Babies cry when a large machine starts humming around their heads. And the solution the team landed on was almost comically simple and almost entirely about comfort. Settle the baby, keep the parent close, make the whole thing feel like nothing much is happening. They managed it with 26 children, ranging from 4 months old to 25 months old. Here is what they did. They showed each infant a series of images: faces, objects, scenes. Then, after a gap of somewhere between 20 and 100 seconds, they showed those same images again, mixed in with images the baby had never seen before, and they watched the eyes. Because babies do something reliable. When a baby recognizes something, the baby looks at it longer. Attention lingers on the familiar. That extra half second of staring is the closest thing to a confession you can get from someone who cannot yet talk. So now the researchers had 2 streams of data: what the hippocampus did while the image went in, and how long the eyes stayed on it when it came back. The result was this: when the hippocampus worked harder during that first viewing, specifically the rear portion of it, that was the image the baby lingered on later. Read that again, because it is the whole finding. The brain activity in the moment predicted the memory afterward. It held for 11 of the 13 infants older than 1 year. Below 1 year of age, it did not appear at all, which suggests that somewhere around the first birthday, the machinery quietly switches on. The work was published in the journal Science in March of 2025. 2 researchers, Adam Ramsaran and Paul Frankland, wrote an accompanying commentary singling out how ingenious the experimental design was. Tracy Riggins, a child psychologist at the University of Maryland who was not involved in the study, made the point that this part of the brain had clearly not been sitting idle after all. But here is where it gets stranger. If an infant brain can encode memories, then the century-old explanation for your missing childhood is wrong, not slightly wrong, wrong at the foundation. Because the blank in your personal history is not a recording failure. It is a retrieval failure. The memories were made. Something happened to them afterward. That is a completely different kind of loss, and it points in a completely different direction. It also lines up with what animal research had been suggesting for years, which is that early memories are not absent so much as unreachable. So what happens to them, nobody can say for certain yet. But there are 2 leading ideas, and both are unsettling in their own way. The first one is physical. Your hippocampus in early childhood is growing at a violent pace, adding new cells constantly. Some researchers think that growth is precisely the problem. That packing fresh circuitry into a structure still expanding around it scrambles the addressing of everything already stored there, the way renovating a building can leave every room number pointing at the wrong door. The second idea is stranger. Consider who filed those memories in the first place. A mind with no language, no sense of itself as one continuous person moving through time, no story to hang anything on. Now consider how adult memory actually works. You retrieve almost everything through words and narrative. You find a memory by telling yourself the beginning of it and letting the rest follow. And if that is right, then the memories may be perfectly intact and written in a format the current version of you can no longer read. Which raises a question that sounds like science fiction, and which the researchers themselves have started taking seriously. If encoding was never the problem, are those memories still in there? Turk Brown's team is now working to track how long early memories last across childhood, and he has openly entertained the possibility that some of them survive into adulthood. Not as anything you could summon, as something stored, intact, and permanently out of reach. Your first birthday. The first face you ever learned. The first time someone picked you up when you were frightened. Possibly not deleted. Possibly just filed somewhere without an index. And this is where it reaches into your life today, because you already know exactly what a retrieval failure feels like. The name that will not come for the person standing right in front of you, the one you have known for years. The word sitting just behind your teeth. Walking into a room and losing the reason you walked in. In every one of those moments, the information exists. Your brain has it. The path to it has simply gone quiet. Infantile amnesia may be that same ordinary failure, running on the longest timescale a human life allows. There is something else worth sitting with, though. Everything you became was decided in the years you cannot review, whether the world felt safe, whether faces meant comfort or meant threat. The rhythm and grammar of your first language absorbed completely before you had a word for grammar. You are running, right now, on conclusions drawn by someone whose reasoning you have no access to. You cannot check their work. You cannot ask them why. You can only notice the results, arriving in your adult life as instincts you never remember choosing. The Yale team has already started on the next question. They are recording children's ordinary daily lives, so that years from now they can play the footage back and see whether those children can tell their own past from a stranger's. Which is a strange thing to need an experiment for, and a stranger thing to realize nobody has ever been able to answer. So go back to the photograph. The baby in it is watching everything, learning the room, filing faces, building in real time the person who would one day pick up that picture and feel absolutely nothing. You have always assumed that baby was not paying attention. The evidence now says the opposite. That baby was paying attention. That baby remembered. You are just the one who cannot reach it.